And we're live. Welcome back. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. So I do want you to know that we did have proof of life. Nick Garber is still alive. He looks like an old man hunched over with all the work they're putting on him, but maybe it'll slow down eventually and we can get him back on the show. We do have a prepped and recorded interview of him where we talk about one of his upcoming.
But we're saving that for when you guys really don't believe us anymore.
Well, we're also saving that because it's going to be paired with a Kickstarter to fund this bad boy. So unfortunately, it's kind of hard to draw when work has you working like a bazillion hours a week. So, but we promise you, we do have proof of life, dear listener. All right. So now that we got that out of the way to prove the third veteran actually exists out there somewhere in the ether, we're going to let Mr. Christian Kallias, the extraordinary cover designer and teller of tales and worder of words. Mr. Chris, can you introduce yourself?
Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is Christian Kallias. I'm 46 years old, born in Switzerland, currently in Greece, and I'm a science fiction author, mostly space opera. Working on Universe in Flames, that's my main series. I have another two series, Far Beyond and Rewind, though that one, we may touch on it, but it's hardly worth mentioning. Let's say it's not been doing well. It's the only series that didn't actually make any money, per se.
Well, maybe
that's because it's one of my favorite stories, but that's how it goes.
Yeah, well, maybe this will help it. So if you don't downplay it and you'd be like, it's really good and you should check it out. And if you haven't, you're missing out.
Yeah.
All right. So the second part of the introduction, dear listener, is how we first found them. So I actually was walking into the 20 Books to 50K conference in 2018, heavily medicated to deal with a large number of people. I think there was more people than are at Dragon Con because there was like 2,000. So
your math skills suck.
Public school, baby, public school math. So I saw him sitting at the back with
not
the tablet.
There to see 20 books. Everybody in Atlanta is pretty much there to see Dragon.
You hush. So I saw him in the back of the room when I was, sort of staying in the back, and he was drawing on a tablet. So I started talking to him because it looked pretty cool. And it sort of still baffles my mind that someone that tells the words also can draw the art, because most of the time those two skills don't intersect. So and we stayed in touch since then, and he's done a couple covers for me. And so when he had a sale coming up tomorrow, I knew we had to get him on the show. So that way you could hear about it and then get some free books, because that's how we roll. So how did you find him, Doc? Were you hiding in the shadows?
You asked me how I feel about Greek, and I went, Greek food's great. And you went, how about Greek authors? And I went, okay. I thought we were talking food. I'm hungry.
That's often how our conversation goes.
Greek food for dinner. Power of suggestion is strong with my stomach.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah, so every time we have Davis on the show, I eat Indian food.
So when you were in Vegas, did you try the American version of Greek food? And if so, what did you think?
Do you really want to know?
Yes, we really want to know.
I'm going to try and stay polite, but it's not
Greek food.
Yeah. So next one is we got to find an Italian author. We can ask them what they think of Olive Garden.
Not even any kind of close. I tried 3 restaurants, mostly in the Bay Area. The owners were really nice. They spoke Greek, so that was fine. I was like, okay, well, they speak Greek. They're gonna know how to cook Greek, but no. It's I think there's too many differences. There's too many ingredients that you guys don't have, and like what the rest of the world, not just the USA, what the rest of the world calls pita bread and what we call pita bread are two different breads, completely different breads. So you cannot find pita outside of Greece. I have never found real pita outside of Greece. The only times I did was in a restaurant in Geneva, that's where I was born, which is also a Greek restaurant. And I asked him, I said, how come do you have real pita? He says, it's because once a month, either myself or another one of the waiters is going to go to Greece, and they're going to bring a bunch with them, and we're going to freeze them, and that way we always have them in the restaurants.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I've seen that with Mexican food. I used to live on the border, and for example, and mole is one of my favorite things. I can't find mole in Atlanta worth eating, so I totally understand.
Well, I
Greek
think
food from Greece is very different,
even
but
if
good.
even if you have all the ingredients, it's one of those things where, like, I learned this because I like to go to microbrews, and there's a one that's called Tap House, which is in theory it's a chain one, but they brew it on the site. And just going in two different cities, and you'll notice the beer tastes different because the water is different, like the different chemical makeups in the local water. And that's why people say you can't get New York pizza from Chicago and vice versa. It's because the water that they use is going to add flavor to it. So that makes sense that the ingredients would change that.
Yeah, there's a company called, I think, Chattanooga Stillhouse, and they have 3 different distilleries throughout the state of Tennessee, and they will sell single barrels that are just from that one, and then they'll do a blended one that's from all 3 because they are different. And like one time, I think I had a friend who went to all 3 of them.
Field trip.
She's a little into her whiskeys. You might know her.
There's nothing wrong with that. So, all right, Doc, we got to ask him the religion question and see if he gets to stay.
Okay.
Not that we've ever actually kicked anyone out.
You never have. You're all bark and no bite. Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly? Which would be your religion?
All 3 of them, pretty much in that order.
That works.
So he's polytheistic. I take it. I can approve the Holy Trinity.
So now for the fantasy ones: Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, or the Potterverse.
Lord of the Rings, for sure. I've seen Game of Thrones. I haven't read the books. I've seen Game of Thrones, and I've seen also the movies, the Harry Potter movies. I've enjoyed GOT all the way until the last 2 seasons, especially the last one. The less said, the better.
Yes,
I'm going to say that. That's probably some of the most horrible writing I've ever.
I have a friend who's honestly she just goes, no, there's only 6 seasons.
Yes, yeah, I would agree.
Because there's only 6 seasons.
Yeah, it's a shame because all the way up until then, that was probably some of the best television ever, and it just all crumbled and died right there, and so quickly. So that was a shame. Lord of the Rings, big fan of that universe, and what Peter Jackson did with the movie was awesome. I'm a little bit less enthusiastic with the Hobbit. I think they were fine movies, but they don't compare with the trilogy, with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, in my opinion.
I've read all the books and I have seen all of the Lord of the Rings movies. I haven't gotten to the Hobbit yet, although we did just buy the videos. But what do you think about? I think it was Amazon or Netflix. I can't remember what streaming service, but somebody bought
Amazon. Lord of the Rings, it's Amazon.
Yeah. Are you excited about that, or what do you think?
The new TV show?
Worried is more the word, but in terms of budget, Amazon is a good thing. When you see what they did with the last 2 seasons of The Expanse, you're like, okay, they definitely have the budget to do amazing things. But I kind of followed a little bit a few YouTubers that are talking about the project. I think they restarted like once or twice already. They're having issues with that production.
Oh, okay. Is it because of COVID or is it something else?
Oh, I think it's. I'm not an expert on the subject, but I heard that they fired half of the writing team and they started over. So it's kind of. I don't think it's going smoothly. That's all I know. I don't have all the details, but that doesn't sound promising. Let's say.
No, it doesn't.
No, it sounds, but you never know, because Ant-Man came out and it was great and it had a shit ton of production problems. I mean, they went through I think 2 directors, several different producers. The fact that the main character, the main actor, he contracted for a Marvel movie, but then he was like, I didn't want to do Ant-Man though. So I mean, and it came out and it did really well. So, and I was really pleased with it. So maybe fingers crossed.
Maybe they can turn it around. That's what you're telling me.
But I'm also always worried whenever they're like, stuff in the book.
Yeah, but you got burned by the Anne McCaffrey stuff, so.
No, I got burned by like the Game of Thrones stuff. I've gotten burned by so many of them. Practical magic. There you go.
Oh, true. All I will say is at least Fox didn't get it, because that is where good ideas go to die.
It is.
Yes. Yes.
I'm still not over Terra Nova. God,
me neither. And they did. It's like they didn't want Firefly to work because they didn't air it in order. They just killed that show from the get-go. The marketing for it was awful. I mean, nothing went right with Firefly.
They've talked all the time about coming back, but unless they're going to redo it, which I'm not really ever a fan of.
No. Their fans talk all the time of them coming back.
Well, the actors, Nathan Fillion has talked about it with the guy that played Wash, I think. I can't remember that actor's name.
That's because Nathan Fillion is no longer doing that ABC show that he was doing for a while.
Castle? I think it's the Rookie.
Castle, yeah. He didn't really talk about it much when he was doing Castle, so.
But yeah, I don't know. It's one of those ones you either do the before story, because we could find out about the Browncoat War before Mal was involved, or you could go after in the aftermath. I prefer when they do movies that way instead of just trying to reboot it and play on nostalgia. Like, take the universe forward or go backwards. But yeah.
Yes, but Walsh can't go forward.
Too soon, Doc. Too soon. I don't even mind that characters die. Like, I've certainly killed my fair share, and I just thought it was the way they did it it just felt so.
Well, that was kind of like an epic yet bittersweet death, though.
Yeah, but it just felt so. I don't know. They could have given it more meaning. Like, if he had sacrificed himself at the end, like, give it a little gravitas. But no, it's just like, something happened. He died. Got lucky on the dice roll.
No, it was completely like you roll a natural 20 and then you rolled a 1. That's what that's.
I just feel like with what they built up, maybe it's hindsight bias because we're looking at it knowing that was the end, and they maybe didn't. But it felt like they should have made it have more meaning. That's where the sacrificing could have come from.
Unfortunately, that's not always how it works.
No, it's not. But, in fiction, we should make it the way we want it to work.
That's not how calories burn either. But speaking of fiction, as I take pot shots at JR,
I will kill you in your sleep.
You'd have to read the map and find me. So what was your first memory of engaging in the speculative fiction genre? Was it
that's
TV
actually
shows, books, movies?
I would say probably anime at a young age. Dragon Ball Z, Saint Seiya, which I don't think didn't really work in the US.
No, I know it.
Okay, well, but not too many people do. Like, it doesn't have the same gravitas as Dragon Ball Z, where in Europe it pretty much had. So, especially France and Spain, I mean, Italy, we're crazy fans of Saint Seiya. And I guess that started back then. I got introduced to role-playing game when probably I was like 14 or 15, and loving both the aspect of role-playing games and anime and manga in general. I started writing as a game master. I started writing these stories left and right. I even created rule books for Dragon Ball Z and Saint Seiya role-playing games when I was a teenager. So I guess that's where it started. My love for Dragon Ball Z also made it that I made a few, I don't know, maybe dozens of pages of my own stories with these characters. When I was that young, say 16, 17, probably 18 also, I had that silly idea that maybe one day I'll be the next Akira Toriyama, but obviously that did not come true.
It's a great goal to have, but I don't think there will ever be one quite like that.
No, I don't think so either. I don't think so either. So I've kept drawing a lot of Dragon Ball Z over the years, and eventually I kind of crafted my own style. Let's say it's basically 90. The DNA of that is 95% Toriyama still, but I made like a few things to say it's a little bit different. But yeah. And then I went to video games, and around in my 20s, I tried creating a real-time strategy game in the vein of StarCraft, Warcraft, StarCraft, but with manga characters, with Dragon Ball Z type powers. I still have sprites somewhere on my hard drives of all the little guys running around and doing things. I worked over 2 years with the team on that. It never went anywhere. We never passed the NDA stage with any publishers. The game was supposed to be Retaliate, and somehow that's kind of the predecessor of Universe in Flames. I mean, a lot of ideas came from back then. So I wrote the story for that as well. So I would say between age 16 and 25 is where I wrote stories, but that weren't intended to ever be books.
Okay.
So normally you would hear Doc's voice asking these questions and the way we split it, but I'm going to have to circle back Jen Psaki style because Doc's not paying attention, or 6 is too hard of a number for her. But which was your first love? Was it sci-fi or fantasy?
I think the first one was fantasy, definitely. Because of the RPGs, I started with Dungeons and Dragons. So I think that cemented. I will always remember the first session I had because it was an expert game master that has been doing that for years and years, and he set the mood. I mean, candlelight and everything. And when his cat jumped on the table, we thought we had a heart attack, and I was like 16 or 17, or even maybe 15. So yeah, we were really deep into the story. He captured the essence of what makes role playing absolutely awesome. So I would say fantasy, and I read books. I'm not a big reader. I know that's a shocker for an author to not be a big reader, but I read more fantasy when I was younger. So Michael Moorcock, most of his work I read, but and then little by little I went to science fiction in terms of books, and it's mostly when I did the switch from being the complete manga or anime otaku that I was to Star Trek. I've always loved Star Wars, and I was watching the movies 3 or 5 times a year. But one of my friends introduced me to Star Trek, and when that happened, I basically went like, well, I love Dragon Ball Z to, well, I love Star Trek. And I made that switch. It doesn't mean that I don't love Dragon Ball Z still, but if I had to choose one now, that would be science fiction. It would be Star Trek. It would be Star Wars. I mean, it would be that genre. Like if I could only take either a genre on a desert island, be it sci-fi or anime, that today at least it would be sci-fi. Back then it was anime, no questions asked. Like my entire life, I was sure anime would never be anything but first on my list. But no, actually my tastes shifted.
So what is it about speculative fiction that you love so much?
Well, I think what I love so much is that, especially sci-fi, fantasy, or space fantasy, which is, I write space opera, but it's more space fantasy because I put so many fantasy elements and so much mythology into my books that actually I think space fantasy is more accurate than space opera, even though marketing-wise, I tend to use space opera because I think some people don't react the right way to space fantasy.
I think fantasy is getting bigger though, but it's just hard for people to figure it out.
Yes, probably that's why. Space opera is more like people get a better, I think, mental image when you say space opera than when you say space fantasy. And in these universes, you pretty much kind of create whatever rules you want. And I think I don't know if it's the rebel in me or whatever, but I've always liked not being tied up to specific rules. And I think that's what appealed to me, is that I can write whatever I want. I can write the types of books that I've never read. The reason why I wrote Universe in Flames is because I don't think I've ever read a book like this. So that's why I wrote it.
I think, speaking of the space fantasy versus space opera, I think part of that is Space opera has just been a genre that people relate to for longer. And then when you had the indie revolution and Amazon came along selling books, you started seeing an expansion of the subgenres. Like the ideas really already existed, but the idea that you would catalog them that way, because instead of having a bookshelf where you have limited room, like at a Barnes and Noble, see, Elvis agrees, you ended up with an unlimited digital space. And so you could get more narrow and more niche. And some of the readers just haven't caught up with that, I think.
Well, that's because if you're working on a bookshelf, you don't want to put a book in like 3 or 4 different places. You want to put all of the books of the same title together with their friends, and then ideally,
so she's biased because
you put the books with their other series. And if you're me, you do them all in order of the series.
She's biased because she used to work for Barnes and Noble, so she's not a fan.
I am.
Bezos, our Lord and Savior. That normally gets dirty looks for her.
I don't make money from Bezos. Maybe I'd like him better if he gave me a paycheck. I don't know, but I love Barnes and Noble, and I love the ability to go in and buy a book in person. It's not the same. I tend to buy 90% of my books either at cons or in. I buy 90 to 95% of my books in person.
So is that this is gonna be a little bit of a derail, but Christian, in Greece and in Geneva where you're at, are they more physical copy, or do they do more of their reading through ebooks?
I think now probably more ebooks, but there's still some places, there's still some shops who sell physical, but also you're going to have the local stuff, and most of the stuff is going to be in French, and well, there's nearly not as many authors as we have in English. You'll find some English, some libraries having English books, obviously, because a lot of people speak English in Switzerland, at least. Greece also, I guess, a little bit in Athens, maybe. Where in Switzerland, Geneva, Zurich, I mean, these English is almost like a part of the language. If you in Switzerland, as you know, there's French, German, and Italian as the main languages. There's one that's pretty much dead, I think, called Romanche, which is a weird mixture of all three. But English is more of a fourth language for these places or for Switzerland than that dead language is. So you'll find books in specialty stores. So libraries are not that many now with Amazon and all the digital revolution, and that's the same in Europe, I think. In Greece, I would say, though, I think people are more used with the paper books still.
Okay.
I think they're more used with the physical book, but I don't know enough readers in these areas. That's the thing. Most of my friends are speaking French or Greek, and their English isn't nearly good enough for them to read my work. So sometimes I give them a copy anyway, but I don't think they're read it or not cover to cover.
At least they have an excuse when I give people my books and they don't read them, and they just because they don't want to read them.
I know that too, because if there's one person in my family who is actually good enough to read the books, is my brother, and his excuse is that he's going to wait for the show or TV or movie series. So
at least it's a vote of confidence. I'll take it.
Yeah, true.
So many authors let their real life experiences sort of influence the stories they tell. So were there any moments that sort of, do you believe, shaped you as a storyteller?
I don't know if that applies. What shapes me as a storyteller, or what made me become an author, there's a story behind that, if that's what you mean.
Yes.
Sure. Yes.
All right. So it was 2014. I was at IT consultant job. Most of my life I've been in IT, and I burned out really bad, actually. I was on the specific day where everything just crumbled. My entire life basically fell into pieces. I didn't even want to. I wasn't sure that it would be a next day, if you catch my drift. And when the dust settled and I tried to understand the nervous breakdown, because that's what I experienced, a nervous breakdown. One thing got loud and clear was you've always been someone creative, and IT is not at least the work that I was doing is not a creative kind of job. I was always doing these creating things on the side, like manga, anime, video games. Books I had barely started. I had started a book back in 2002, but it was something that I was visiting every blue moon or something, and I would just like spend the night writing it and then not touch it for another year or two. So when that happened, actually, I felt a strong push to not just deal with the aftermath of the burnout, because obviously I got under medication, I went to a shrink, I lost my job. I mean, all sorts of things happened from the burnout. And one thing that was the clearest is that I need to be creative. So I just dusted off that 40% of a book that I had, which was already called Earth Last Century. It might have been called Earth Final Century or something, but I changed it to Last Century. And I finished the book probably within the first draft, probably within 5 or 6 weeks after the burnout. It went pretty fast, thinking that from 2002 all the way to 2014, I had like barely 40% of a book. And in 6 weeks, I just finished the draft. And then it took a while longer for me to understand how it works. Will I try and find a publisher? Will I go at it on my own? Is it even an option? And Google is your friend. So I Googled and apparently you can be your author on your own. You don't need anybody to do that, which was fine with me because there was one thing that before I would even print a manuscript and send it to a publisher, there was already one thing that I knew would not work with me, is that I don't like being told what to do. Like in almost any facets of life, nobody tells me what to do. So if they're gonna come back and say we don't like that character or we don't like that scene, that wouldn't fly with me. So when I saw that I could actually just release whatever I want on the way I want it, I said that's a no-brainer. I'm not even gonna try publishing. I'm gonna go straight to indie. So what I did.
That's I'm laughing because a lot of authors I know, they'll be like, oh no, I can take direction. I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't. It's like hurting a wild group of animals. But transitioning.
I will say it's not as unusual as you think. I've met lots of authors who started their creative writing as sort of therapy.
Okay.
They even teach classes at the VA, the Veterans Administration, writing as therapy for people with PTSD, because that's how I started. So it's not that unusual to do it that way. It's just unusual when you publicly admit it.
Okay.
Most people will tell you the fiction. Oh, I've wanted to be an author since I was in the womb. I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. It sounds good on a postcard, but
it's kind of the last thing. For me, it's kind of the last medium where I imagine my storytelling would take place. Like I said, I thought it would be either a visual, graphical novel, comic book, whatever, video game, but I never expected books because, like I said, I'm not such a big reader. So I didn't expect to use words as my medium, but probably, yes?
Oh, I was going to say, I've talked to a number of authors who say as they've started writing more, they read less because you have time. You can do one or the other, and unfortunately, you cannot do them both at once, or you get some weird jangle mess.
True.
Unless you want to go back to kindergarten and have someone read the stories to you when you go on your walks. She makes fun of my audio habit. That's how I listen to books.
I don't make fun of your audio habit. I make fun of your math skills.
That too. But yeah, I do mostly audio when I walk because that's how I fit in my book reading because I'm so busy.
See, I do audio at work, so I don't make fun of you for that. Just your math skills.
I went to public school. It's not my fault.
All right. I also do audiobooks but even so, even with audiobooks, I noticed I'm gonna maybe listen to 1, 2, or 3 a year tops. I'm never gonna find or dedicate the time to it. But the thing is, the argument is correct. A when you write, you don't have as much time as you had before for reading. But I wasn't reading even before I was writing. That's the thing. I don't know. I cannot give you a number, but I wouldn't be surprised if I read maybe maximum 150 books in my life. That's not many.
No,
maybe
but
200. I don't know, because I haven't kept count. But I know people who read a book a week. So obviously, they've read hundreds or thousands of books. Some people I know read 3 books a week.
I have a mother who I joke that she is a book slut. She reads books. She could finish a book, like a 250-page book. She can finish it in a day.
Okay.
Like she's like insane. Whereas I can take a month. So I understand. But transitioning from writing and talking about things kind of from the fun fan angle, what is your weirdest or funniest interaction you've had since you started writing?
Can you just repeat the question? I'm not sure I got it.
Okay. So what was the weirdest or funniest interaction you've had with a fan since you've started writing?
With a fan. Okay. With a fan, I have a few fans that became friends that we email each other. Some of them even text each other. And there's one especially that sent me is Pickles. Actually, he does awesome pickles, sweet pickles. They're the best I've ever had. And he sent me twice already, two batches already. So
nice.
Yeah, that's nice. The only problem is that I live in Greece. He lives in the USA, and the postage is just insane. So that's not something he can do. Like, he would like to send me more. It's just that sending me a couple of jars of pickles, he's probably paying like $80 just to send me these things. So that's I'm very thankful, but that there's a little bit of a problem with the transport.
We should bring you to the States for a con. Have you come to the States for a con, and then he can send you lots of pickles while you're at the con.
One time in the US, when I came for 20 books, I was in the US. So the first batch sent me in the US. The second batch I was in Greece, so he sent it in Greece. That's why there's probably not going to be a third batch. But he said the exact same thing as you. He said, next time you're in Vegas, I'm going to bring you more.
Homemade pickles are amazing. They're much better than anything you get in the store.
For sure.
And I think pickles are definitely, I mean, throughout history in the world, people pickled things, but pickles seem to be a very U.S. common thing these days. So
we don't here we have in France they have the ones they call cornichons, which are, but they're in brine, so they're not sweet. They're not sweet at all. And that's something. When I first experienced the American pickle in 2017, and I was like, why does my vegetable taste like candy? So I was surprised.
That is a very sweet pickle. So JR said that he met you through drawing on your tablet. So that means you're an artist and you do do you make
Sorry.
And how did you get into kind of doing that?
And I had like not even a third of the question. After tablet, what did you say?
Oh, and so JR saw you writing tablets, working on your tablet. How did you get into doing the visual arts aspect of it? And he said that you make cover art.
Oh, okay. There's also a funny story behind that. It's I had never ever intended on making my own book covers. That was never the plan. Once I finished Earth Last Sanctuary, I went on DeviantArt and I looked for artists, and I was like, okay, that's gonna be my first book. It's my baby. I want the cover to be the best it can ever be. I don't care how much it costs. It just have to be the best. And I looked for hours and hours and hours, and I found an artist that I thought matched well with what I wanted, and I gave him the commission. And months passed, first 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. And after 5 months, I was like, well, that's kind of delaying the launch of my book. So where are we at with the cover? And there were along that period of time, there were many excuses. My car broke down, my boiler broke down, something else broke down, and eventually I said that it seems a little weird that every time I ask you where we're at with the cover, something breaks down. And he came clean and he said, well, I have too many commissions, but I'm going to do your cover. I'm going to do your cover. And it didn't match the scene I had in my head for Earth Last Century. And back then I was an author who wanted, at least for Earth Last Century, I wanted that scene. And nowadays I'm way more relaxed. I just want the cover to look badass. I don't mind whatever. It doesn't matter whether it matches what's in the book or not anymore. But back then I was like, I think many authors will recognize themselves. They have a specific image for their cover. So
I actually knew one author who got his cover art, went back and rewrote a scene in the book to match the cover art.
Oh yeah, I've heard that too. More than once actually. When and on a couple of covers I've delivered, I heard the author was like, oh, I'm going to rewrite the thing so it matches your. I told him I don't think it's necessary, but whatever floats your boat. And so when it became clear that I may not get the cover that I wanted, I wondered, could I do it myself? Because I had done covers in the past for heavy metal and heavy metal bands. We're talking 2004 until 2009. During that period, I was also independent. I mean, self-employed. And doing metal covers was one of these jobs. I was doing all sorts of things like websites, business cards, flyers, whatever graphical job I could find. And I was like, okay, well, you did metal CD covers, book covers, another type of cover, but it's true I had never tried much science fiction. And if on my website where I sell the covers, there's actually a gallery where you can see really old stuff that I did, even those Dragon Ball Z drawings we've mentioned. And so that was mostly fantasy. So I was used with that. I had and now, let's say in the last 10 years, or 15 years, most of my artwork is digital. It's mostly 3D rendering. So I had all these assets for fantasy. I didn't have that many assets for sci-fi. So I bought a bunch of assets, like that mean scorpion looking ship on my first book. And I played around with the apps, because some of these apps I hadn't used for 5, 7, 10 years. So I needed kind of a refresh course. So I went into it, and 100 hours later, I think, I had a cover that I actually liked. But I went crazy with the details. The amount of details on that cover is insane, meaning that you can zoom in and still see details on the ships where it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense for a book cover. You don't need that amount of detail. Back then, I didn't know that, and being a little bit of a perfectionist and having the time, because I was waiting for the artist to give me a new rendition and final rendition of his version of the cover, I was like, well, what's going to happen? He does his, I do mine, and I compare and I decide what to do. And his cover was dope, no questions about it. It had nothing to do with what I asked, but it was awesome looking. But he had changed so many things. Like, for example, I wanted an F-14 Tomcat, but a futuristic version of it in space, because that happens in my books. And the first cover that he had made a perfect futuristic space-capable Tomcat. So that was awesome. And then on the second cover, he just painted a Tomcat in space. And I was like, that's great, but it's the exact Tomcat that's in atmosphere. So that's,
yeah.
The ship felt, the fighters felt out of place. So on mine, I inverted some wings. I did some stuff to make it look like it's a little bit modified, at least. Anyway, so at the end of the day, I went with my cover because I would never want to go back. I would never want to go through again the experience. The experience was awful for me because it delayed my launch by 3 or 4 months easily.
That's no fun because then you're not figuring out and.
It costed okay. I only ended up paying the first half because I didn't take his artwork. He didn't ask me to pay the full thing, but it was still, the full cover was over £1,000, so that was not cheap.
No.
So yeah, so I was like, what's this gonna be like? Let's say I have book 2 quickly ready, and then I have to wait another 3 or 6 months, and so on and so forth. So I thought, I know that if I do it, I'll just put the hours that I need to make it as fast and as good as I can. But I never ever intended for me to be my own artist. It just happened this way. I'm glad I stuck with it because I think I got way better over the years. And now I make covers like when I needed 100 hours to do that cover today. If I needed to do it from scratch, and even at that level of detail, probably in less than 7-8 hours, 10 hours tops, I would be done for that specific cover that has a ton of detail. I know book covers don't need that much detail nowadays because they're going to be so tiny on Amazon. What's the point of going? But seriously, if I get you the original file, which I think is 18,000 pixel by 10,000 pixel.
Oh, good goodness, that's
you
big.
just grab that thing and put it on a billboard, and you can still have to go near to see the detail.
So you mentioned that you do your designs in a 3D rendering. So does that mean that you could generate STL files so someone could 3D print the models from your books?
Yes, myself too, actually. But the thing is,
have you 3D printed one of your ships?
Not yet. I tried printing one of them, I think. I did try to print one of them, but it didn't go super well, and I haven't painted it yet. It's something on the back of my mind that I want to do. I do have a couple of printers here, so I want to do it. I want to take the time to actually print them. But most of these models, they are not my models. I'm buying assets because it's one thing to do the artwork. I mean, to do the cover. It's another to model your own ships. It's something that I want to do because I have some knowledge of 3D modeling. I did follow a couple of courses for that back 15 years now. So it's something that I would like to do. It's just that then I would like to do my own video game, and I would like to create my own spaceship and go to the stars. It's the difference between what I want and what I have the time to do, actually.
Yeah,
that I understand. So I've seen an article a couple years ago about how some of the most iconic spaceships in science fiction were created from like the artist seeing random items like a remote control for a television and something else, and then they shaped it together, and you got some of the Star Wars art. So have you let any random pieces like that inspire you?
No, not directly. But what I did find funny, it's a little bit different, but I will say it because the way my brain works with like ADHD and stuff. When you said something like the ship that you see on Earth Last Century, the first cover, that Scorpion ship, is actually in the show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, so they basically grabbed the same model that I did. I bought it on a 3D website, Renderosity, I think. Yeah, Renderosity. Back then, I bought that ship, and I used the original textures that came with it. Where in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they retextured it completely to make it their own. So it's more dark they have like a more black and green color scheme for it. I think it's in I don't remember which season, but one of the, probably not the last one.
Probably.
Yeah, there's one really big ship, and because I worked so many hours on that, I recognized it immediately. I was like, that's the model I used on Earth Last Century. So that was
awesome.
Yeah, there's funny about that. Like some of the for a while, everyone was using the same Space Marine asset. For instance, it was on all the covers in the 2016 era when I published my first one. And so everybody, it's like all the covers were the same. And then as everyone else got into like professionally made, like original covers, I'm the only one with that art still out there that's really out there. So now it's retro. So that's one of those things where sometimes things will come in and out of fashion. And if you leave them long enough, then you become the cool one again. So
true. True. That can definitely happen. And because I bought hundreds of assets, I have hundreds of assets, thousands if we count everything that I have for fantasy, that I had purchased mostly for metal covers. I do see ships coming. Like I'm like, okay, that ship. I'm using that ship too. On some covers, I'm like, I have that ship too in my covers. It's just that it doesn't show. I mean, I think it's only somebody who used the model who's going to recognize it, because there's also the way you apply light to the scene. It's also the composition. It's also the position you decided, how you position your ship. That sometimes makes such a difference that somebody's not going to know that it's the same ship. I will immediately, because when I bring it into the scene, I'm going to rotate all over it until I find the right angle. And then my brain will remember it. And just looking at the silhouette of it, I'm going to be, oh, that's that model.
So you do something a little different, I've noticed with yours. Mal Cooper teaches that when she teaches some of the author classes, that spaceship ass is what sells. So the back of the spaceship's what she has on a lot of her covers. And I notice you do a lot more side profiles or even cockpit looking out profiles.
Yes.
So
yes,
what makes you decide that route?
It's just I don't find it so interesting to see the ass of the ship. Sorry. I mean, from time I have.
I love it. It's hilarious.
I have. If you look at the third book in the series, Destination Oblivion is the only one I think, and the fourth book also, where you have that angle where you see the reactors, and I spend a real long time crafting the best reactors exhaust that I could, but. After these two, I was like, there's nowhere to go from. I mean, no, what else can I do? Like, it's going to be the same thing with the flames and no. So yes, I mostly prefer the ship coming at the camera or on the side. Yeah, I will do from time to time or on request. I will do these as well, but it's not my go-to. That's true.
So normally we don't focus on things from like a writing angle. This is a podcast of, by, and for the fans. And so we tend not to get into the craft, but I think, your art is fascinating because you stand out. You're different. I can look through the Amazon page and I can tell you the covers you design. They stick out. We will link to your art page in the show notes so people can check it out. My internet is not good enough right now with the weekend and everybody not being at work, so the signal is down. I can't get it up to phrasing. I can't get the site to show for you. Doc, stop laughing. Stop laughing right now.
You said
it's a heavy site. It's a heavy site.
It is, but the art is amazing in the file. So when I've bought art from you and I've used for short stories, from that angle, short stories tend not to sell enough that it makes sense to pay for a unique cover, right? Stock art is generally the way to go, and it doesn't even have to be that good, just good enough to get the point across. Not that I'm saying yours aren't that good. I'm just saying it's the minimum standard for a cover. Doc, stop laughing. I'm trying, all right? But, you've got a minimum standard you have to hit.
Sandwich?
Yep, you might as well eat the whole shoe while I'm at it, right? So when I bought yours, I bought pre-made, but you have several packages of pre-made, and then you have commission art. So how does that work with your business?
Well, commission, I rarely do commission. I will do commission. I will make what I usually do is I try to negotiate the level, because I have bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. And I will negotiate some sort of level, and that's the amount of detail I'm going to put into the cover. But I'm not going to go. I don't think I've won. There's only one author to whom I do full commission. A couple of authors that I do full commissions with. So for them, it's like either we go platinum directly, and I know that I'm going to spend more hours and try and craft something that matches their vision. But I'm not going to be as. I am usually easy to work with, but I don't want to have to go over and over and iterate again and again and again, because then you never finish. There are some people who want the little thing, that little piece there, and that this moon should have been 12 degrees more to the side, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's okay. You catch my drift. Like it's
I see those.
It's that kind of nitpick is the reason why I'm mostly business-wise. I'm mostly presenting my artwork as pre-mades. But what my future customers need to know is that I am actually easy to work with. Like if they're like, well, I would have preferred if the ship was the other way around and maybe the background wasn't so red and it was more of a blue background, then no problem. If it's something that I know I'm gonna change in half an hour, it's not gonna be a problem for me. I'm gonna do it. It's just that sometimes some commissions can turn wrong because you keep adding stuff and sometimes even diminishing the quality of the cover. I think I probably, because many authors work with me and because of my books did pretty well, I think my covers, they must be to a certain level. I'm not saying they're awesome, but they are good enough. So I know what I'm doing. It's just.
Yeah. Well, and also I've seen, and I've talked with some people, they don't always understand that somewhere the title has to fit on there.
There's that as well. Yeah.
So, because I'll have friends who go, "What do you think of this?" And I went, "Well, where are you putting your name and where are you putting your title?" So, that, and I had one friend once joke that I should really just go by my nickname if I ever publish because my full name is so long. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. So, but no, I mean, and I think I actually did talk to somebody I met at a con briefly, and they were like, yeah, no, I actually go by my nickname because his name was really, really long, and it was like over 10 letters, and then he had a long last name, and he was like, there's just no room on the cover for that.
So this is a example of some of his work. Let me see if I can zoom that in for you guys.
I love it, and I can see the anime in there.
Yeah,
but, like, the influence.
This one especially, yeah. There's a bit of Macross in there.
Yeah, I am a huge Macross fan, so huge.
So yeah, he's puts the rare, though. It's probably the only you probably picked one of the only ones that looks a little bit animated. They usually don't.
I'm going to show a couple more real quick before we move on. But while we do that, while I pull those up, you had mentioned that you were going to be running some sales for your art as well. Did you want to talk about that?
Yes, I thought it would be fun to provide listeners of the podcast a coupon. So my idea was that if you were interested in getting any of my covers, just mention to me in whatever channel of communication, be it Facebook, my contact page on christiankallias.com or kallias.com, because that's the same contact page, or via email. Just mention BB30 and I'll give you 30% off your first cover.
Cool.
That's a good deal. And I'm going to show one last one because this is my favorite from his pre-generated site, so I had to share it. It's busy, but not too busy that you can't see it, and there's still room for you to put stuff like your name.
And there's actually a spaceship has on this one too.
What Mal said. Maybe she's onto something. But I love all the detail.
Thank you. That's the same ship. That's the ship from Earth-class Sanctuary, and the one that was in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that red ship.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I recall that, seeing that kind of shape.
The weirdest one I saw was, and it was on an anthology I was in, put out by, I'm drawing a blank, it was Alien Days, and they actually had one of the Star Wars ships on the cover, but apparently the Star Wars ship was made by a fan who had the right to license it. Disney just started using it, but this guy's still selling it, so everyone's like, you can't have it on your cover, it's Disney, they're going to sue you. But I'm like, no, he had the rights to it.
It's amazing what those rights do.
I do have a few ships that look like Star Wars ships, but they're not. I was very careful to make sure they're not actual like Star Destroyers or whatever. But some of them look a little. Usually they're not the point of focus, though. They're like in the background or something. Yeah. But I think it's evident on book 4. There's in the first iteration of Earth-class Sanctuary also, because I remade that cover. The one that you see from now, the Earth-class Sanctuary Definitive Edition, I took many of the elements from the cover, but I added the cockpit in front, and I added more fighters, and it's a different cover from the original. Yes, that one. It's the ship, that main Scorpion ship, like I call it. that one is the same position, and the other ships around it. Some of them are also from the original cover, but I added some stuff. I subtracted others, and I made a little bit of space also, so I can add the cockpit view. Because after all, my main character he started as an ace pilot, so I thought that it's a good thing to have a cockpit point of view.
You also had some that I've seen in advertising that actually almost look like they're animated, so like parts of it look like it's moving almost. You added an effect I've seen, which I think is kind of cool. So,
yes, I do. That's one. I also propose that as an option on Kallias.com. Is I can actually, once the cover is finished, I can add a few layers animated, so you can actually use that as a Facebook post, and it's going to attract a little bit more attention because there's going to be a little bit of movement.
Oh yeah,
and it worked because it got my attention, but. I'm easy to impress, as Doc keeps telling me.
No. You're easy to outmath.
Yeah, blah. All right. So, how did you come up with the idea for the Universe in Flames, specifically Book 1, which is Earth Last Sanctuary? Where did you get the premise for this series?
Okay, so the original premise comes from when I wanted to do that real-time strategy video game, though not much survived from that. Like the main, if you want, it's the main tropes that are still there, like the ancient enemy rising from the ashes when we thought they were dead. These tropes, I kept them, but since I'm a pantser, I just went with the stuff that I love, and I think on some level you can find some Top Gun also in the first book. Because that's kind of the personality that the ace pilot that knows better, that flies he has his own way of flying that goes against the book, but he's a genius, so he makes it work. So that's where it started. And when I started Earth Last Sanctuary, Universe in Flames in general, I wasn't exactly sure how long the series would go, probably 3-4 books in my head. But as I pens my way through books, I kept adding so many elements, so many new characters, so many new concepts that these stories took a life of their own. And we're at book 15, and I'm not done yet.
Wow.
That happens. Sometimes you just get hooked. So normally we would ask you to tell us the story of this cover, but you sort of already did that. So what I'll ask you instead is, we mentioned some authors will change the story to match the covers. Did you find yourself doing that as you're making your covers in later books, making them more aligned?
No, there were a couple of times where I was like, now I made that character on that cover and he has an armor and I didn't mention the armor. Should I just go mention the armor in the book? And sometimes I do add like 3 words here and there. Sometimes I don't.
Okay.
Most of the time I'm not going to bother. I think the main role of a cover is that it pops and grabs the attention and gives the reader the envy to click on it and read the blurb to know what the book is about. When you did that, you did 99% of the job as far as the cover is. I don't think I've never heard any of my readers coming and saying, well, you see, in that book, I thought that this ship was that ship, and then on that cover, it's a completely different ship. So I don't understand, what does this scene represent? Nobody ever asked me that question.
Okay, that's fair.
So do you normally write the book first, or do the cover art as you're doing the book?
Most of the time, I will do the book first.
Okay.
And when I craft the cover, I'm just going to go with my guts, try and do something that I like. And if it's easy enough that I can match maybe some details of the book, then I'll put it in. But I'm not going to, back when I did this one, Earth Last Sanctuary, even the previous version, which is pretty similar to this one, if you remove the cockpit and the background was a little bit darker, but that's, and you remove the 4 starfighters in front of the cockpit, you get what the old cover was like. So for this one, yes, because that's a scene from the book. But that's almost, and the second one, and the third one, and the fourth one, and the fifth one, and I think all the way to 6, I try to match the concept not every single detail, but the concept was trying to match something happening in the book. I rarely do that now. Like, I'm just gonna say, okay, there's gonna be this character, but when I do put a character, I try at least 90% of the time that it's the character in the book, like the way I pictured it. In fact, for book 15, that's gonna be released. It's released already. Sorry. For this book, I went with 2 versions, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I actually pushed book 15 the way it is in the series, and I made a limited special edition. Let's say it's not limited; it's a special edition, and that one has way more graphics in the book. So it has, I think, a total of 11 posters. Some of them are, some of them are. There's a couple of spaceship posters, like specs. You see them from different angles, and there's a few information. It's not a full spec sheet for the ship, because that would take way more time probably. But I still think it's something that the fans are gonna enjoy. And at the end of the book, there's 9 posters from the 7 or 9 posters, actually 7 posters from different characters. And these, I actually spent a lot of time crafting them, so they are my visual interpretation of how these characters look in the book. So that was a titanic work. So I made 2 different editions, mostly because Amazon tends to take delivery fees when you put a lot of images. They lower the amount of money they pay you. So I thought, well, if that's the case, then I'm going to do 2 editions, one with the images and one without. At the end of the day, I don't know if it's Vellum or the app that I used to create the final book, or what, but they were weighing way less than I thought they would. So I'll probably just lower the price of the edition, because there's not as much as I was expecting a bigger difference in terms of how much the delivery fee would end up costing.
Okay.
Obviously, there's also the amount of work. Just for book 15, there was 3 weeks, 8 hours a day work, no weekends, where I just did all these illustrations. And on top of the ones that I mentioned, I made a mini illustration as a chapter editor for all 28 chapters. So that's a lot of work.
Okay. So moving on to the story itself, what would your 30-second elevator pitch for Earth Last Sanctuary be?
30 seconds. That's not long enough. If I was on the like, if it was really 30 seconds, I would probably just use some of the reviews that I got, even though I think it's an oversimplification of my work. But I've seen it 2 or 3 times already, where people were saying that's basically Star Wars with Dragon Ball Z, the series. And I can agree on some level. There is some Star Wars. There is definitely some Dragon Ball Z in there too, in terms of my inspiration, because these are probably my 2 favorite universe ever. So it is bleeding through. That's true. But I think that it resembles neither in terms of the story that I present, nor the fact that I'm putting a lot of Greek mythology, mostly in the first 7 books. And starting book 7 or book 8, we also get Norse mythology. So first, it's mostly Olympus and the Greek pantheon of gods, and then we get the Asgards.
I like this.
That sounds fascinating. So what is it you think that makes your series special?
I used to think that it was the epic set piece, the non-stop action, and because I really like fast-paced stuff. So with me, you're not gonna get into a room and 3 pages later something's gonna happen, because I'm not gonna describe that room. I'm gonna let you make your own picture of that room. I'm just gonna go straight to what's gonna happen inside the room, or inside the situation. And I used to think that was what made them special, but so many of my readers tell me that they've grown so attached to my characters to the point where they feel like they're members of their family or really close friends, that I guess it's probably a mixture of both. The fact that I always try to go epic, large, and high stakes, but at the same time, it's all boils down to the characters and what they go through. So I don't know. I think probably most of the books are like this. Like, I don't think it is that special. The one thing that maybe is special, and I'm not even sure of that, because maybe there are books out there that are exactly like mine, but I haven't read them, is the way I rewrote the mythology. Like, I didn't just take the mythology the way it was and try to echo it exactly. I just said, okay, these are the bases. Zeus is the main guy at the Olympians. He's the king of Olympus, and yes, Athena is his daughter, and I tried to keep only the family tree intact, but everything else I just remade my own mythologies, my own stories with it. Like they're just more advanced alien species roaming the stars. They are not, we humans consider them gods, but they're just other humanoids with different powers, and their deeds or whatever inspired our legends, but they're not gods per se. They're just more advanced.
So did you watch Stargate then? Because they used.
Oh yeah, sure. While I was saying that, I was like, but that's Stargate. So, yeah, you can add that. You can add that to my list of religions too. Yeah.
Yeah,
I love Stargate. Absolutely love Stargate.
Did you watch Stargate Universe?
I did. That's my least favorite one, however.
Oh, we were so close to being best buds. With the romance was almost there. We almost had that bromance, and then you're like,
okay.
Sorry, the show got canceled. I mean, we got the announcement of the show being canceled on the episode I finally started liking the show.
Oh,
so,
fair,
I hate it when that happens.
Stupid television producers.
Yeah.
So,
No, it is a nice. I mean, I'm sure if I rewatch it, I will enjoy it more. It's just it was too much of a departure from the spirit of the first two series, and it was more of a Battlestar Galactification of Stargate. And I love Battlestar Galactica. I love the darker tone. I love these elements. I just thought it didn't click with me on Universe. Not right away, anyway. When it did, they canceled it.
Yeah. I think it's when you take a series, particularly like a TV series or a media series, where this is going to sound really mean. I don't think the fans work or attach necessarily as quickly to it. Like with books, there's a level of nuance and you get attached to some of the characters. You, depending on how the authors write, you are literally in that character's head. That when you kind of take a 90-degree turn, the fans don't always stay with you because they're not always willing to do the work to see if where you're going for it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And in fact, I can make a parallel with my series with that, because Earth Last Century is a very military sci-fi kind of space opera, where there's only mentions of powers. There's no powers per se that are really shown, not many anyway. And that changes very fast during book 2. So when I pushed the publish button on book 2, I was scared to death, because we went from a bare bones sci-fi story to something that has a way lot more fantasy and way more powers in terms of what the characters can and cannot do.
Yeah, but I like a good space fantasy when the author kind of knows it's a space fantasy. I drive the Star Wars fans nuts because I'm like, it's a space fantasy. They're like, no, it's not.
There is a rule that once you put a dragon in it, it becomes fantasy and it's no longer.
There's no such rule as that, JR. It all depends on the mechanics of the world. We're not going to torture.
So
they are dragons, so I'm screwed. It is fantasy.
Well, she said you'd be in good company because Anne McCaffrey did put dragons in her alleged sci-fi, and that's like Doc's favorite book series ever.
There aren't many. I don't want people to think that there are tons, but no, there's a little bit, especially in they're more toward the second season, because I my arc, I call them seasons. And so the first 10 books are season 1, and the next books are season 2. So there's more of a the dragon race that they're called the Dragon Men. They're mentioned already in the first season, but we never see them. We actually see them in season 2.
Okay.
Ooh, that sounds like fun.
So in the side notes, you don't ever see, dear listener, because we can't figure out how to caption it, and we'd probably have to charge for that because the programs aren't free. But Doc was just telling me she thinks you're a lot of fun, Christian, and she thinks you should come to Dragon. There's like 12 people to go, so you might find new readers.
Oh, that would be great if it's doable, if it's feasible. Because lately, let's just say that traveling is a kind of it's gotten a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
Well, at least there's like a year between now and then.
Yeah.
We just did the show. So believe me, we're rooting for things to be less complicated. So but so you talked some about the tropes that you've already done, and we've talked a bit about subgenres, but we haven't talked anything about your character.
The main one.
Your main character. Can you tell us a bit about your main character?
Okay, so my main character is called Cisca Thanatos. That's a Greek name. It means immortal. And he's basically your typical rebel that doesn't like to follow orders. I wonder where he gets that from. And he's I'm not gonna spoil it. I'm not gonna say anything. He's that type of hotshot maverick type of pilot. So that's where we start with him, and little by little he's going to discover that he's actually not even the same race as the people he's fighting with. It's mostly because it's space fantasy, and because I like these kind of tropes. It's basically an interstellar war between forces of darkness and the light. That's basically how I can put it. And he's going to discover he's different. And with that will come new things. It's difficult to say anything without spoiling a future reader. So
oh yeah,
I don't know if I can say more than that. But let's just say he starts somewhere and ends up completely at the opposite where he thought he would end up.
And we don't want spoilers, so
I can understand that. I think we all have that happen at times also to us in real life. So you said main character, but so there's secondary characters, right? Or is it more of an ensemble?
That's actually the bane of my existence right now at book 15, because I have more than 30 active characters. So writing books is getting to be more and more complicated because I'm not gonna red wedding them because that's not what I do. Actually probably more using plot armor than I should because I really like my characters, but it's becoming really hard to actually cater to all the secondary characters. So there will be books where I'm making a conscious decision. Okay, these 5 characters, maybe they're gonna have a line or two, but that's it, because otherwise I'm never going to be able to fit that in. And I do a lot of webbing where there's like 2, 3, 4, 5 different sub stories, and they have to all get back to the main story at the end. So if I add just one more of these to my writing process, my books are going to take even longer than they do now. Because I think that's one of the reasons why I don't write as fast as before, is that the cast has kept growing and growing. So
have you thought about spinning them off into their own unique series?
Yes, I have. But I did. It's just that the way I write this particular series, they almost never have time to do anything. So I rarely do that many days or that many weeks or that many. It's more like if you watch 24, it's more like it just follows and follows and follows. Sometimes the cliffhanger of one book and the first words from the next book, there's literally 5 seconds between these two. So that makes it way more difficult to find pockets of space where I can do that.
So it sounds awesome, but I definitely can understand and sympathize with the cast of characters growing too much. So, can you tell us a bit about your bad guys without giving away too many spoilers?
Yeah, without spoiler, that's going to be difficult. There are bad guys, obviously. I'm just gonna say I'm gonna make the 24 parallel here, where during the season when the season starts, you think this guy is the bad guy, and then he dies, and then this guy is the bad guy, and then something happened, and this guy is the bad guy, and sometimes all the way up to the penultimate episode, it's only then that you know who the real bad guy is. So it's kind of a little bit like this, and I'm not surprised because, funny tidbit, when I was finished writing book 7 and I was about to launch it, and I was working on the cover and on the marketing and on everything, and I was tired because I had overworked for weeks, and on the back here you can probably see there's a projector here. There you go. So on top of my 3 screens where I work, I have a white wall. So sometimes I will project stuff on top of it, just as the like if you would turn on the TV to have something in the background. When I write, I don't do that because I cannot have myself writing while other people are having dialogue. That doesn't work. But I will listen to heavy metal, no problem. That's not going to help. That's not going to be an issue. Sometimes might even help. But when I edit or when I do graphics or when I do that type of job, sometimes when I'm tired mentally, it helps me to just like rewatch something that I know by heart. So that's my go-tos are gonna be Babylon 5, Stargate, Star Trek. I'm just gonna put these in the background. I know them so much that they don't even take 0.001% of my CPU, if I can call my brain that. And I was doing that work on book 7, Armageddon Unleashed, and then I stopped and I was looking at the show and I'm like, I think 24 played a huge role on how I actually develop my books, like the way I split between the different stories and how I always kind of leave mini cliffhangers even inside the book. So you go back from one, like you follow thread 1, and at the end of that chapter, there's like a mini thing. Something's going to happen, but you're going to have to wait because now we're on thread 2 and then on thread 3 and then on thread 4, and we go back. And rewatching the show like this, I was like, I caught that subconsciously. I caught that from 24.
Okay.
And I think and for the bad guys, there is kind of something similar. Also, I would say that without giving too much spoilers.
Okay.
They're usually quite interesting and quite multifaceted, and there's I really like my bad guys, but and I think most authors do, but I don't know.
So there's a question I love to ask because I think it's always a funny one to see. If your characters met you in a back alley and they knew who you were, how would you fare? Like they knew you were responsible for them.
Okay, so if they knew that I was responsible for some of their stuff, like Chase would probably beat the shit out of me. But I don't think he would be very happy with me. Let's just put it that way without going into too much spoilers. I don't think Chase would be very happy with me because I don't tend to write I'm not a fan of a story that has to absolutely end as a happy ending. It hasn't for me. War is not. War has its consequences. You can achieve victory, and that's actually, I think, the hook from my last book in the series, in the season, is victory as a prize. And while definitely Chase pays multiple prices for whatever he goes through. I mean, he's a great guy. I think he's a hero type. But it's not the kind of things that for me, it wouldn't be realistic if everything just ended just perfect and nice and colorful and everybody's happy and then you have like Jawas playing music and you know what I mean, fireworks in the background. I was never a fan of these additions to the end of the. I mean, the playing the music is fine, but showing all the partying at the end during when he added these elements, I wasn't a fan of it because that's trying to make it too much of a happy ending.
Well, and I think in some ways it can cheapen the overall result.
Yeah, and whatever the characters might have went through also. I mean, yeah, whoever they may have lost along the way.
Yeah. And then...
So normally we also like to ask, because you're a pantser, so this might apply. Were there any cool scenes or ideas from the first novel, Earth Last Sanctuary, that you cut that might be kind of cool to tell us about? Because since you write as you go, I imagine there's plenty of room for you to...
Oh, there's plenty of room where I want to go somewhere, and in the end, I don't go there. Earth Last Sanctuary, no. Universe in Flames, yes. So there's been ideas that I had that I was hoping to make work. Like, for example, before I wrote Earth Last Sanctuary in 2002, I published a 30 pages. It's like a comic book because it's in color, but it's in manga style. So it's called the Kyrian Chronicles, and it's in a fantasy world. But there's a link with my universe. Like it happens on the same timeline as Universe in Flames. And I always wanted to link these two. Like it was my idea that I will come to a point in the story where I can actually do a time travel trick, where I can go and do the Kyrian Chronicles and return back to, and maybe make a synergy between sci-fi and fantasy, and have actually two series and have a synergy between the two of them. And I had multiple ideas, but every time I looked at it from the perspective of scheduling, like I'm already not such a prolific author. I mean, I can write a book within 3-4 months, but rarely earlier than that. So I was worried that if I did jump from one universe to the other, I would lose too much of my audience. And that has happened, actually, and had nothing to do with this. It's just that when I wrote Far Beyond, the other series, my second series, I noticed that I had a hard time writing both of them at the same time, or one and the other. And it ended that in between book 10, which is the last of season 1, and book 11, I think there were 12 or 13 months, and that was the longest that ever happened in my series. And I can tell you, in terms of sales, I've noticed that season 2 has been way less, selling way less than season 1. And I think that's partly because I went to Far Beyond, which is a completely different story. It's more young adult. I don't want to say tongue in cheek, but it's more lighthearted. It's also a space opera. There's a lot of reference to pop culture and the action movies of the 80s and the 90s, Aliens, Predator, so on and so forth. So there is and there's a lot more video game elements also into that series. We're following Kevin, who is 18 years old, and he's thrown in the middle of an intergalactic war, and whenever he has to deal with something, it's mostly what he knows from pop culture that comes in to do. So they're different enough that I got new readers for Far Beyond, and I got some that are crossing in both universes. But I think the fact that I spent too much time in between book 10 and 11 is a decision that today I regret. I think I should have finished first at least season 2 before venturing to another series.
So you mentioned the time it takes you to write a book. So how long are your books?
Okay, so it depends. I would say on average 85,000 words. That's an average for the series. But you have books on season 1 that clock at 115. I think the last one I think is 115. So it's a much longer book. You have shorter books too. Now they tend to be a little bit shorter. Now they're more around the 65, 70 mark. That's for Universe in Flames. Far Beyond, because it's more lighthearted and there's way less threads and there's way less characters, they're shorter books. They're 45, 50K.
So for those of you who don't translate the number of thousands of words to the number of pages, that's roughly 275 to 300 page range is what he's saying is normal. Because you average between 250 and 400 words per page, depending on font size.
That sounds like a normal size book to me.
Yeah, it's pretty normal. Some indies try to keep up with Brandon Sanderson and write like a 250,000 word chapter. And
don't do that. Just write your story that is appropriate to what you're doing.
So
yeah.
You've told us a little bit about the universe, but you mentioned the gods. How much of a role do these gods that are just aliens play in the story? Are they part of a larger arc?
It's major. Oh yeah, they're still throughout the series, and it's major. Yeah.
All right, because then we will move on because I don't want any spoilers. Last Sanctuary is clearly part of a series. I know because it says so on Amazon, and you've told me there are 15 books out. But is their story done? What do you see coming next?
Okay. The story is not done, but the arc for season 2 is coming to a close. I think book 15 was the penultimate book, so the next one should finish season 2. Now, on some level, it may actually finish Universe in Flames, but I don't never say never because I'm not done with this cast of characters. Not by a long shot. I even have prequels in the work. I already have some prequels written. It's just I don't have enough of them because I want, whenever I'm ready with the prequels, I want to kind of a rapid release. So unless all the prequels are written, I'm probably not gonna release them. So I don't, because I'm not gonna be sure whether or not I'm gonna have the time to just follow up if, let's say, the prequel, they like the prequels. So, and the prequels, they came about because one of my magnets was Wings of Destiny, and Wings of Destiny is 5 years before the events of Earth Last Century, when Chase and his friends are actually still at the academy, still learning how to be starfighter pilots, and it's 18,000 words novelette, if you wish, that sets the character before we meet him in Earth Last Century. We figure out some of his flaws, let's say, in his personality, where they come from. But I found it really interesting to write the character nowadays back before all the stuff that happens in the series. So now I'm actually writing more episodes, and I'm calling them episodes because they will probably be shorter. They will probably clock around 40, 50K also, probably max. Also because I want to focus on a tighter set of characters. I want to focus on Chase, which is the main character. Daniel is best friend, which is the main character, is a secondary character, but is always there. The captain of the series, Captain Sarudis, that's in both Wings of Destiny and Earth Last Century. I also want to focus on these characters. So, and because there's not all the events, because again, I'm trying to be really careful with spoilers here. There's not all the events and all the craziness that happens in the main series. I'm trying to have this more of a show about, space pilots in a galactic war, but within the confine of the story that we can deduce or know some of it from Universe in Flames. Okay. So I'm not done, if you wish. I will revisit with these prequels. I will revisit the universe, and they may even become the new starting point at one point. I don't know, because I think I like the idea of having these books eventually becoming the new book 1, if you want. But for book 16, my idea is to close season 2, to bring it to a close. But I know that there's a lot of things that need to happen for that to not be rushed. I'm never rushing anything. So if it takes 2 books, if it does take 2 books to finish the series, what will happen is that there will be 2 books if it's needed. They're going to release together. I'm not going to do what I did with season 1, which I think also maybe some people didn't like, because I did something that I never thought I would. I put part 1 into the title. And because I was already at I think 100,000 words, and I was like, well, I need another 100,000 words to finish the story, so I'm going to release this one and call it part 1. and I saw a drop in sales. So because people were like, well, I'm going to wait for part 2, but by the time part 2 landed, maybe they just moved on to another series. I'm just speculating here. I'm just telling you what my stats shown. So and I didn't need to put part 1 because it's just that I thought, because on book 8 I told them book 9 will probably be the last one for the season, and because I didn't want to be a liar, I just added the part 1, but it was just another book, and there was a need for another one to really.
If your lie is you give them more books instead of less, I can guarantee you no reader will ever care.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good. It's a shame if, let's say, I don't know, 20 or 30% of them moved on because they were like, I'm going to wait for part 2, and then they forgot that there was even in part 1.
One of the things that I think probably one of my favorite marketing things that made me laugh the hardest was I read there's a trilogy called The Witches of Elenia, and it was supposed to be a trilogy. And the back of book 2 said, don't forget to pick up the exciting conclusion of the trilogy. And you're reading this, and I was like 14 or 15 at the time. And I remember it's the first time I remember actually criticizing either marketing or storytelling. And I was like, the only way for her to do this is if a meteor destroys everything, because then it doesn't matter. So, and sure enough, there were 7 books in the series.
So her 7-book trilogy.
It was a trilogy.
Yeah, because Universe in Flames took off in 2017 when I released my first trilogy. That's when it went bestseller. I didn't understand what was going on. Honestly, I didn't expect that because, okay, I had book sales. I was doing okay. I wasn't doing good enough to be full-time author. I still was, because back then I was married, and well, we were separated but still married, and we were sharing the load, so we made it work. But in 2017, all of a sudden, I became number 1 in I don't know, like 7 categories. I passed in front of Timothy Zahn. I mean, I will remember that always. I'm at Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm watching the movie. I'm loving the movie. And when the credits roll, my friend and editor, she told me, just watch the movie. Just don't look at your rank. Just watch the movie. And I said, that's a good idea. So I put my phone in my pocket, and I didn't want. But when the credits started rolling, I took my phone out and I looked, and I was in front of Timothy Zahn, which is one of my favorite authors. And I'm like, I'm in front of him in the charts. And I was like, I even make it a little pun. I dethroned him. And I was like, so I will remember that moment forever. So since then, since I did the trilogies, that's when sales really picked up. And well, since I had book 9 and then I needed a book 10 to finish, my third trilogy is actually a quadrilogy because it has book 7, 8, 9, and 10. But I still called it the third trilogy. So there you go.
That works.
Okay. So what kind of technology, and if we've got God's magic, can we expect from these books?
Okay, so in terms of technology, it plays an important role in the same way it does in Stargate. Like every time there's a problem and Rodney has to fix it, or Sam has to fix it. So there's that kind of element you'll find in Universe in Flames, where it's the upgrades on how to defeat a certain tech from the bad guys. That's prevalent throughout the series. And still to this day, on the last book that I just published, that still happens. So there's a lot of now, whether or not it's something new or revolutionary, I don't know. I don't think so. But there's a mixture between the way technology is used and the way strategy, like how do you use that technology to achieve victory?
So how much magic is in your universe? I'm always curious to see is it a high magic, low magic? Like, does everybody do it? Is it rare?
No, there's only a few races that have magic, what you would consider magic powers. They're basically as strong as Saiyans, honestly. So that's the level of magic you can expect. They can definitely destroy entire cities or or planets for that matter. So that was also a little bit of an issue at one point. I was like, well, I'm getting the same problem that we get on shows like Dragon Ball Z, is that if your character can do that, then what's the next threat? So very early on, I had to find an explanation to make sure that some characters cannot use their powers in certain situations. Let's just say they are not allowed to use their powers in outer space. I'm explaining why. I don't want to spoil anything, but that's because otherwise the guy would just go outside and destroy an entire fleet, and let's move on.
Yeah, that
wouldn't be interesting. That wouldn't be interesting.
No, so it gets boring.
Yeah, there is an explanation that I think works really well why they cannot do that. So they can do that on the surface of a planet, not in outer space.
Interesting. So, of all the magic or tech you've developed for your universe, which would you use for daily use? Like, which one could you steal and use it? Or would want to?
Probably that's from Far Beyond, and not from Universe in Flames. In Universe in Flames, the one that I would use, I will tell that because I think it's funny, but in Universe, and I didn't invent it, it's called a food synthesizer. It's basically a replicator. So I would use that because I'm such a lazy, if I could just walk to the wall and say, give me some Kung Pao chicken, I would do it right now. So
I love to cook, and I would still do that because I hate to deal with the dishes.
Okay, I hate that. I hate that too, and even the dishwasher. It doesn't matter. I hate that too. But I love to cook. It's just I'm not taking the time to cook. Like whenever I think, like I'm like, okay, now I would really love some sushis, and let's say vegan sushis, because in Greece I have no idea where I could find the right grade of fish, so I would never even try. I would just do something with vegetables, which I would enjoy just the same. I do it from time to time, like once a year or twice a year, because the amount of work I've
made sushi from scratch. It's a lot of work.
I will Hiroshima my entire kitchen. That's the problem. So, and then there's going to be like, I'm going to be too tired to clean it up, and the next day is going to be 3 times the work because I waited the next day to clean it up. And so that's why if somebody comes at home, I will absolutely love cooking a meal for them. I would love that. But for myself, I'll be like, can do a quick salad or a quick sandwich. It gets the job done, you know? So that's why if I had a replicator, that thing would get used all the time. That's how I would do things. But on the technologies that I created, probably somebody thought of it too, but is Kevin gets a nanite armor, which is it's basically an armor that gives him the power of the T-1000 in Terminator, so he can morph into whatever he wants. So he's gonna morph into a xenomorph, and if you get the image of the black thing with the mouth in the mouth, you'd be right. He's gonna morph into a dragon. He's gonna morph into a giant anime robot. He's gonna morph into whatever he wants. So and animals as well. So that actually would be really cool because you could morph into anything. So you could be somehow like actually it is nothing new. You could be like Odo in Deep Space Nine. Like you could take whatever shape you want. It's just that the technology goes farther in the fact that it would be more like Odo with the power of the Green Lantern, because whatever he thinks of, also technologically, whatever weapons he muster in his imagination, the nanites in his armor are going to make it happen.
That's cool. So you've mentioned that you have aliens and fantastic creatures. How did you go about designing them? Were they inspired by nightmares, a lot of heavy metal rock?
No, not specifically. I guess the bad guys in season 2, you could find them in your nightmares most likely, yeah. But in season 1, not so much. In season 1, it's just different alien races that do whatever power play they do for their grasp of power for their own reasons. But they don't have a physicality to them that there's the inhabitants of that scorpion ship on the cover. They are kind of lizard-like. So there are a couple of scenes where I wrote it a little bit like scenes of horror from time, especially from the perspective of somebody who doesn't have powers. So they have these really strong metal-like scales. So even if you shoot them, that just bounce off of them. So they're difficult to kill. So yeah, but these guys they're not even that important, let's say, in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, that was a lot to take in, but I like it, and I would definitely abuse if I could morph into anything. I'd never wait in line again. I mean, that's one thing the Army breathes into you is to hurry up and wait. So if I had a way to cheat the line, I mean, we might go a little crazy. But then that might make us the bad guy. So I don't know.
That's the thing. It's you always have to wait. Like, okay, I could have that super cool power, but am I going to abuse it? And am I going to turn into a supervillain doing it?
All right. So since clearly this is winding down, we spent a little bit of time talking about your cover, so we went a little bit long, but I'm sure our listeners are okay with that. Before we wrap this up, was there anything about Universe in Flames, or more specifically Earth Last Sanctuary, that we didn't ask that you wanted to tell us before we move on?
Earth Last Sanctuary in particular, no, I don't think so. Like I said, it's Earth Last Sanctuary. I really gets the space opera type, and military sci-fi fans will definitely enjoy it. It has that vibe. Just going forward, now at least it's some small spoiler. We have some very powerful powers coming into play. It's funny to see how the readers have reacted to that. You have the crowd that knows and have seen Dragon Ball Z who are like, "Oh, that's so cool! It's like Dragon Ball Z," and you have the other crowd who are like, "Oh, it's like Marvel," because they're not exposed to Dragon Ball Z. So for them, they're more like superheroes. Like they think my characters are superheroes. Superman is mentioned from time to time also. So yeah, that's the funny thing.
Are they available in audiobook?
They used to be. I had them with Tentor, but now I got my rights back. I don't have an exact timetable, but they're going to be released soon.
Okay. Do you know
maybe even this or next month, but I don't have an exact date, so I don't want people to think that they're going to be right there. But they're down the line. They're in the works. And definitely by the end of the year, you'll see them attached to the book. Yeah, and I way prefer this narrator. Way.
Can you tell us who the narrator is?
He's called Zachary Johnson.
Huh. Okay. I've heard of him. I will check it out. All right. This is a good time to remind you, dear listener, that this is going to be airing on the 7th. That's tomorrow. His couple of his books are going to be free, so you should check out his.
Yeah. What's going to happen is one book free, so you're going to have book 8 free, and you'll have the Olympus Rising 1 to 7 box set is at $0.99. So for 99 cents, I think that comes out around 12 cents a book. When you grab book 8, you get 8 books, probably 3,500 pages or so, or something like that, or 3,000 pages.
That's my mom. Then that'll
page.
Okay, so when you do your bundles, do you put new short stories in it, or is it just bundling it together?
Okay, so in the trilogy format, no, it's just bundles. In my box sets, there's extras. That's in some cases you used to only find them in these box sets. There's extra stories. For example, I mentioned Wings of Destiny. It was only released in those box sets.
Okay.
And there's more. There's even more. The Olympus Rising actually has a story of. Well, I cannot say without spoiling, but there's an interesting extra story there that was only published, and still to this day is only published in Olympus Rising.
Okay, so this is the part of the. I remind you, dear listener, that I'm assuming you're listening because you're readers as well. So when you finish your book, please be kind and speak your mind on those reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books. I've even bought some off of 0 stars, 1 star, excuse me. I guess they don't really let you do zeros. Said this was like, what was it? 12-year-old wrote gun porn, and I'm like, dude, sign me up, pew pew all the way. And I actually had that same reader review mine accordingly. It says 12-year-old with ADHD wrote military sci-fi, and I'm like, yeah, it's accurate.
So they know you.
It's like they know me. Maybe it was my mom. I don't know. But so your reviews matter, and even if you don't like it, if you can be constructive in why, you can either help the authors you're reading get better, or help the right readers find books that just weren't for you. And sometimes that happens. And life's too short to read bad books. So share your thoughts, and it helps everybody. So as we bring this to a close, Christian, can you tell everybody how they can reach you? And as usual, it will be in the show notes.
Okay, so you can reach me on my main website, which is christiankallias.com. That's the main place to contact me. It's also, the links are obviously also in all of my books. You can find me on Facebook as well. I think it's easier that you get the link from the show notes. And for covers, it's just kallias.com.
All right, and if you use the BB30, you will
BB30,
get that.
Just mention that, and I'll be happy to get you 30% off your first cover.
All right, and you can find us on our website at anchor.fm/blasters tack and tack blades, anchor.fm/blasters tack and tack blades. We're over on the Twitters at SF_fantasy_show, Sierra Foxtrot _fantasy_show. You can email the show at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. That is blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. All hate mail can go to Cisca at blastersandblades.com. We can have all of the shenanigans if you want to join us in our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, /groups/Blasters and Blades Podcast. And finally, you can support the show over at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Put in the comment section that it's for the podcast. We will keep our co-hosts, Nick Garber and Doc Cisca, duly intoxicated. They will drink until their liver surrenders.
Never surrender.
And you can also support us over on anchor.fm/blasters tack and tack blades. Your contributions help keeps the light on, pays for the overhead. So, reach out. And if you've got any suggestions on who you want us to interview next, you can also suggest that. I'm willing to stalk and reach out to everybody. We've got a few open requests from some of the bigger name authors that might take a while to finagle. But if you've got others you want, just reach out and let us know. And if you want to tell Cisca why pineapple on pizza is evil, be sure to do that in the Facebook group too. Oh, Kitty!
I suggest this guy for the next interview because he likes to talk.
All right, Doc, you ready to bring us home now that you're going goo-goo for the kitty?
Thank you for spending your precious time with us. For Nick Garber, J.R. Handley, I'm Cisca. This was a Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week, same time, same place, where we indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, pineapple on pizza, torturing JR, and all things that go boom.
I love pineapple on pizza.
See?
Thank you for having me. Oh yeah, I love it. It's one of my favorite toppings.
I don't know that I can stand in the same room with him
anymore.